Tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou I te kaupapa Aotearoa. Tēnā koutou katoa. 32 years ago, at this conference, I met my husband. He's not here today. But Brian, were you at that conference? Probably. And I think Catherine Peat might have been at that conference. And it's a bit scary, actually. I know 28 years I've been specifically in adult literacy because I've got a 28-year-old daughter, and I was 9 months pregnant in her interview and 4 months a new mother when I took her to work with me at the local adult literacy scheme. But I'd been working with women before that. I had actually been an adult educator with the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, training fisheries officers. And after that, I went off to be a trainer in marriage guidance. So both ag and fish and marriage guidance have gone out of business in that form. There you go. It's great to be here to talk about the things that matter on the learning journey. And last year, I had the privilege of 5 weeks travelling on a Winston Churchill Fellowship to look at joined-up literacy action. I thought when I left I knew what that meant, but I now know I didn't. I wanted to see what happened when communities as big as cities took on joined-up literacy action. And because COMET Auckland has a big brief thinking about cradle to career education. This is a picture from the Huddersfield station bus, the train station in Sheffield, which I got onto at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was about to get on the train and go to Liverpool, to where the Beatles came from, and I saw this sign, and actually it kind of epitomised a conversation I was having at lunchtime. Imagine if Te Puhi and Marae, which is housing homeless people in Auckland, had a mobile library. So you had lots of free books and people could take them away. You often have them at your summer camping ground. Where else could we have free books for swapping? So families with no books at home could get access to free resources. COMET has an interest in cradle to career literacy. And I come out of as a high school teacher of English, then into adult literacy, and now I've come back to the beginning really. But we have created this pathway to success diagram to show the relationship between what happens here, literacy markers at school, and the need for literacy at life. Parenting support and literacy for citizenship align to what it is that children need to be successful in literacy just when they start school. So that's the kind of thinking we have in our mind as this little organisation that's an advocate organisation thinking about how do you join up to make a difference. And when I'm talking literacy, I'm talking about lifelong learning and citizenship and social inclusion, and I'm not talking about reading and writing and the national standards. So out of the 11 organisations I went to in 9 cities in 5 weeks, excuse me, I didn't come across groundbreaking insight, but I did come across a really powerful message everywhere I went, that you have to see literacy as explicitly part of poverty reduction in quite a political way, and you have to be thinking about it in terms of urban regeneration and the housing movement, and that's particularly poignant when you come from Auckland. Everywhere I went, people were making those connections and looking to see how they could bring the poverty agenda and the adult learning agenda together. And of course I was looking at what it takes to join up, to find the village, to join up. The second thing I saw that was different for me was the health driver. So this, I don't know if you can read this that clearly, but it's finding the right words for better health, October's Health Literacy Month. There were lots of examples where it was health that was funding the literacy, and it was doing that particularly out of mental health and social inclusion, and I found that interesting. And then some of these collectives that I was looking at, like a general manager of public health or the chief medical officer was at the table, or sometimes the chair of initiatives, because they were seeing the connection between literacy and community and individual and family wellbeing so strongly. Cross-sector collaborations take a long time. What I did not see, and I had hoped to, was really that overseas they'd unlocked the power of parents. They saw a need to focus parents, but I don't think I saw what I'd hoped, which was really understanding the strength of parents. But they were aspiring to do this, but they were not, very few organisations were doing that, and that's going to be my conversation today. How could the ACE world do more of this? And a vision. Last week, the European Literacy Policy Network released a vision for literacy, which has got 10 points, and I meant to bring a slide of it, and I forgot, that talks about, imagine putting on the map early oral language and early literacy and lifelong financial and digital literacy on the same diagram, with schools and secondary schools and tertiary on the same diagram. What we have at the moment is a set of better public service targets that are extremely isolated. So there was a couple of examples of visions, and I think we need to, be bolder about developing a cross-sector vision. But let me go on. There is no magic bullet. One of the most interesting things was this. So the National Literacy Trust has been around for about 30 years, but its prominence is really increasing. It has an interest in school literacy for sure, but it's done an analysis by communities of the school achievement, literacy and deprivation rates in towns across England, and it's identified the 10 poorest towns. And it's got a philanthropic foundation to back it for a decade, and I was interested in the decade of funding that in Indonesia for women. You need a decade to make a difference. And they have decided to create these literacy action hubs, and they're up to 3 are established and 4 and 5 are in going, and the first one is they've just released their first evaluation report. Interestingly enough, they started with the data, and one of the bits of that data I think is really interesting is how they've been able to look at good readers earn more money. So hold on to that, remember, good readers earn more money. Second thing they could see in the analysis they did in communities, that lots of social service staff, housing staff and health organisations saw adult literacy issues, but they didn't know what to do about them. They very rarely referred anybody on to any service. They didn't know, or the services didn't connect. And of course you had aggregation of people with low literacy. And what is interesting for the ACE community, I think, is that their thesis is when you have people with low literacy, often that leads to fewer social contacts, which leads to shrinking your horizon, having fewer options, feeling like you can go fewer places, which leads you to have fewer social connections. So you get a self-fulfilling prophecy of not having a very big network, which means that if the network hasn't got a lot of resources, you get stuck. So I think it's again worth hanging on to when we look at what they do. So the school, clearly they've got a school hub action. So interestingly enough, I think, the primary schools in an area, so you might have 50 primary schools, you might have 10 high schools, they fund their own cross-sector leadership. They put up a primary lead and a secondary lead and they fund it so that it's not controlled by the centre, it's not controlled by the state. And those two co-leaders, they have principals and they're very high mana to do this work, and they start saying, what could we do together? Now that's what the communities of learning might do in New Zealand, except for the fact that at this point they're restricted by better public service targets. So finding a way to get primary, secondary and early learning to come together, still a work in progress. They use data, they do a student reading survey data, which is very powerful in local communities. They use football to attract kids. This is boys, and they have a Premier League soccer teams who are readers and champions of reading. They've started looking at strategies that relate to boys in the second term of their end of primary school, in-home visits, making sure parents enrol them, giving them a mentor, giving them some summer holiday activity, taking them on school visits, and then getting them to start school, making sure they're there on day one, and having worked with them until the end of term one, so they have a relationship with school, because so many boys drop out of transition. And Words for Work's a program they do in schools where they get employers to come in at year 11 to talk about work and work communication, and they get the kids to role play without writing some of the things that happen when you're communicating at work, to make them meet employers and to understand about real world stuff. But they also, at these high level hub strategy groups, bring in the community. So they have early words together. Now that's a high need community early learning centre, trains up some local parents to coach other parents on a peer-to-peer program of 6 weeks of how could you talk and read to your kids differently. And they have a handbook, and so you get, it's a bit like hippie day, which is a year long. So it gives a local leadership opportunity, like Play Centre used to do, to some parents, and it gives peer-to-peer, so you're building a social capital in the community. They make friends, they have people to relate to, and you improve school readiness. They do things like put their travelling books on the buses to the poorest parts of town. They don't just send them out, they think, all right, we'll physically have literacy volunteers who take the books at 5 o'clock on a Thursday night after the pub run, or something like that. They're thinking all the time, how do they get more books into the community, because they know the books are limited. They've moved the Adult Learners Week to a festival of learning. They're getting towns to say, let's have a big storytelling week. So everybody, poets, writers, the schools and the adult learning people are backing the idea of let's come together on storytelling. So if you have in one of the places I went to, they had they'd recruited a Pakistani male coordinator, and he was bringing an imam to the school, and the kids were allowed to read sacred texts, and they were allowed to interact with them outside the mosque, and they were allowed to copy them and illustrate them and show that they were taonga, they were treasure. And the imam gave that mana, and the boys got engaged, and the leaders felt connected to the schools. That's not something that you necessarily have to organise from the school's point of view. And then they had programs that were specifically around linking to health. So they had parent packs for premature baby families. Prem babies, often in hospital a long time. Sometimes they can't touch their baby, they have to talk to the baby. So you get sick of talking, what do you talk about, to a scrap of humanity that only fits into your hand. Give them books. Often they are from vulnerable families who are not confident about reading, so coach them in reading. Have some books for the toddler, who is there also creating havoc in the prem baby, around the prem baby units. Things like that. That are not rocket science, are they? But they are joining up, thinking about joining up. And this is a poster from Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough is a really poor town up on the, went from Liverpool to the far northeast. It's as far across England as you can go, from 5 o'clock one morning to 5 o'clock the next night. And this is their little poster, and you can't read the words, but it's basically saying babies need to be talked and listened to from the minute they're born. It's never too late to share a story. I think they're great graphics, and we need to have more of those. Would you see those messages on the walls of every adult learning centre in New Zealand? No. What would we might do about this if we could all take up these messages together? Save the Children UK are starting a community campaign to have children read to 10 minutes a day, because they want to save poor boys, because poor white boys actually are doing worse in the statistics in England. The rate of social deprivation, if you haven't learned to read fluently by the time you leave primary school, is so high that end primary school becomes a major marker. So Save the Children have never done a campaign in the UK before. They want to save kids inside England. Why? Why are they promoting early reading? Well, you've got a gender distinction, a major gender distinction, and you've got a poverty issue around reading, and you've got about oral language when you start school. You've got, this is a really interesting statistic, their survey shows that kids don't see reading leads to success. If you think about the statistic on the first slide, good readers earn 20% more. Kids aren't getting that. They don't think their parents care. So it's an intergenerational issue, and they're not actually reading. So if you don't read and practice, you don't get more fluent. So you'll see my challenge is, what do we as the ACE and adult literacy communities need to do to unpack those messages for all the whānau who turn up and come through our doors. Because I know, as an adult literacy practitioner, when I was in a scheme, I stayed as far away from people as I could. And I think I would do it differently now. I think we actually have to be thinking consciously about this. The reader organisation has a wonderful, simple idea. The reader organisation is setting up reader groups to read aloud. They train volunteers to read a good book once a week in a public space, like a library, or a community centre, or a dementia unit, or the lounge of a public hospital ward. And this is all being funded by health for social inclusion and mental well-being. And they've got hundreds of groups operating, very low cost. And it's very empowering. And in some places, they're taking unemployed young people and giving them the skills. It's one thing they can do. It's not, they only have to work in very small groups. It gives them work experience, gives them an opportunity to build some relationship with others. Those disaffected young, not necessarily 15 to 18-year-olds, but slightly older adults, but training up some of them who are more confident readers to take an action that gives back in quite a safe way, and they're seeing it as an employability strategy. So it's got multiple factors. A woman in Auckland who is a librarian has mortgaged her house to go to England to have the training for this because she thinks it's so powerful she wants to do it. She's got 3 groups running in Auckland, very small, it's proving hard to get off the ground, but she's just got her first health group. So we'll watch that space. In Auckland, she's calling it the Reading Revolution. If any of you have been around a long time, you will have had talks from NIACE in the past. NIACE for 90 years has been the national voice for adult learning in the UK. That's a place that has been a wonderful set of allies for us. And sadly, on the 1st of January, NIACE merged with the National Institute of Lifelong Learning, and we've now got something else. I'll tell you in a minute. So why they're interesting is because they talk a lot about this need for life course policy. They look at the spend. 40% of the population in this age group, 11% of the budget. So out of those sets of principles, you need to work, people who are working, more likely to be learning. They've created the citizens curriculum. This is the anchor that they're using in place-based citywide initiatives. So in a way, they're kind of mirroring what the National Literacy Trust is doing, but they're coming at it from the adult point of view, not starting with the schools. And I've been saying to a few people today, I've shown this picture around a bit, that I think it's quite a powerful image to encapsulate what it is we all need to be thriving in society now. And if you think about how you could construct that kind of thinking around our adult education programs, I think it's got it's quite a compelling story. There's your Swiss Army knife, prepared for everything. So now NIACE has become the Learning and Work Institute. So you can see that, learning and work. So the idea of the adult voice. Alan Tuckett, the chief executive of NIACE for years, promoted the idea of seriously useless knowledge. He said that because he came here and he spoke to some of the adult education conferences, he said we need to know things that appear on the surface to have no intrinsic economic value, because things on the margins are where change takes place, not things that are already well accepted. And so he's no longer the director, I'll let you know, he's retired. He's a professor now, but he's not having as much fun in his new job. And I just included this because this is just, if you'll get it better on your individual screens, but it's an analysis of the impact. And I think it's really interesting. Look, that people did a citizens curriculum course and they ended up going to the dentist. They ended up increasing their drug and alcohol counselling. They ended up accessing more local services. I think that's a really good one, the open servicing. So it's a very good representing of change, isn't it? And I thought I wanted my PowerPoint to be a resource for you later, because the Winston Churchill Fellowship was such a gift for me. My responsibility is to try and take it out. So I thought you would find that helpful for other things you're doing. And then I went to see Professor Professor Kathy Nutt-Brown in Sheffield University. And I mean, I must say that the things that stood out for me are not actually the collective places. They're things I fell over while I was there. But Kathy Nutt-Brown has spent 20 years trying to get the schooling and early learning communities to understand that parents are adult learners and that adult learning principles have to be applied in parenting education. Not rocket science, but she's an ECE professor. But she's really unique. And her work over 20 years has led her to create this thing here, which is a framework for understanding what families can do about early learning. I want to shift, she said I shift that box to the left. Oral language, environmental print, books and early writing. How can families create opportunities to see and do activities around those things? How can families recognise children's willingness to engage with those strands? How can they interact and play and work alongside their children, and how can they model actively reading and writing? So she started, they did have home visiting in this, but she said two really powerful things to me. They trained up 20 coaches, and each of those coaches had to go and share with 20 others, thinking about sustainability. So not just thinking everything had to be in a package that was in a professional development course for 20 weeks, would cost a fortune. How do you think about scale, affordable scale when you start? So she said that. And then she said to me, Alison, it's been 20 years since my first trial with some families, a small number of families, in one early learning centre. This year, that was last year, 20 years later, this methodology is going out through the National Children's Bureau to families involved with 168,000 kids. She said it takes time. And I thought, oh no, I can't be it. couldn't we speed anything up? But I've included that again because if you are working in a family learning space, she wants to give this all away. A lot of it's on her website down here. You can access it. She just wants you to join her network, send her your email, and tell her what you're doing with it. She just wants to know. She's encapsulated something to me about a structure about thinking about family learning that would be really useful in some of our family learning programs, because she's married child development need with the parent insight. So I would be interested if any of you want to develop that up. And this is one of the things she's got. She's got these 4 jigsaws, and this is the jigsaw for literacy. So they give them to families, and sometimes they take some of the text off it, but they get the families to colour in or create and take photographs of when the child is doing these things, and then they write more things that the child is doing in the literacy activity. And they have 4 jigsaws, and they can join them together as a way of the family tracking the change that's happening in the child's life. And then I popped over to America to a collective impact conference. If you were upstairs at the data conversation, there was talk about collective impact. Because I'm involved in collective impact in Auckland. It's really hard. How do you get a group of very different organisations together around one goal? Well, one of the most powerful, there's a city initiative that I saw, was cities taking on the grade level reading campaign. This is a very big initiative, rather like the Read On, Get On campaign in the UK, but much more focused and structured. I put this up here because of the language. They build a big tent. They try and work out collectively what the data points are going to be for success. And they think about community solutions. And they're looking at careers. So they are unashamedly talking about the relationship between reading at the age of 10, when you transition from learning to read to reading to learn. And they're saying that marker is so great that we all need to focus on it. And I came back thinking the adult education community as well. So I've included this in here as well, so you can easily find the grade level reading site. And one of the things that they talk about is health, growing healthy readers. Healthy readers have to be healthy at preschool, have their developmental needs met, have their asthma managed, have their skin conditions managed, go to school and be at school attending regularly enough. Most of those things are actually not within the school's domain. Actually, they're within the family domain. In adult education programs and adult literacy programs have thousands of vulnerable families connected to them. Are we playing any part in this? And interestingly enough, if you were again up at the big data conversation upstairs, it's very clear that if you attend school regularly and are on time in your last year of primary school, you greatly increase your chances of getting NCEA 2. Because the kids at risk have already started not turning up and being late. Some of those kids will be missing the equivalent of 1.5 years of school in their lifetime between 5 and 15 by sickness or being truant. So, and I'm not talking, on average. So it's the attendance becomes important. But this is, I've put this in here interesting because what they're doing is bundling together. Why do you do breakfast in schools, which is often a community activity? Why do you do that? Okay, kids are hungry, but actually this is kind of wrapping it around the long game. And then you can see that you can have different kind of players at the table. And this is about dental care for preschoolers as a community issue in order to have kids well enough to be interested in learning so that they are keen when they hit primary school. So I went to Baltimore and that was really powerful, and what Baltimore is doing is looking at this. Parents as first teachers and brain builders. Parents as coaches. I love the language. So they are looking at how do we get more families having their children school ready? How do we get more families thinking about attendance? And again, if you think about all the parents, whānau, grandparents and aunts and uncles who come to ACE programs, what's the message to them that we could promote about these factors being whānau important factors, not just individual factors? This is something we all could contribute to together. My 5 weeks away and my year of thinking has led me to be spearheading a campaign about talking, because I didn't realise as an English teacher at high school that the most important thing that needed to happen was kids needed to talk. And in order for kids to talk and have the words in their head, they need to have language-rich environments. And that isn't everybody's experience. So, groundbreaking research in 1995 looked at some children's language experience. Child A hears 600 words an hour. Now don't assume I'm talking about a not loving family, but I am talking about a family lacking economic capital, maybe social capital as well. Child A is likely to hear, get up now, put your shoes on, time to have breakfast, we're going in the car, have you got your bag, we're going to go down to the playgroup, I've got to go to the grocery, shall we go buy bananas? Child C, hearing 2,000 words an hour, is much more likely to hear, shall we put on our gumboots or wear shoes? What about if we go, should we walk down to the supermarket? When we go to the supermarket, then we might go in and say, look at those apples, aren't they big? There's a yellow apple and a green apple and a red apple. Which one will we pick? Do you like red fruit the most? So child C is getting lots more incidental words and concepts. Busyness, stress, maternal depression, poverty, 3 jobs, no nana, too much TV. Multiplicity of reasons. But when you look at the experience of child A and child C hears and interacts with 30 million words more than child A by the age of 4. Guess who starts school better? It's the Matthew effect. If you start with more at the beginning of school, you get more. If you start behind, everyone's got to work harder to help you get, catch up. So, early oral language really matters, and this is one of the challenges I've come back to, and I want to work with the adult literacy and the adult learning community to see what we can do collectively. Because when you don't have this, little 5-year-olds struggle to start school. They struggle to ask for what they need. They are coming in unable to say in their most confident language, this is not children who are all English language learners, new English language learners. They're coming in unable to express themselves, unable to ask for help. They don't know colours, they don't know shapes, they've never picked up a pair of scissors. They haven't done any of the things that prepares them for school. Now you could say, I bet they've got a rich cultural life that's different from school. And it's just that school's not recognising what they know. That could be the case. Some school teachers would say it's increasingly not that. It's increasingly that screens, busy parents, very busy childcare centres that are only about 2-year-olds and only about 3-year-olds, fewer children in the family, no nana to talk to them, is all contributing to this fact that they haven't got as much oral language as they used to. My child's too young to learn. Why would I read to my child? They're not at school yet. Why are you talking to my kid? The kid can't talk back to you. We've done some very small interactions with families about some of this. And this person here, a person up there said, oh, I don't read to my child. This is a person with 3 degrees. There's no point in my reading to my child. He can't read. I have to wait. And they were 7 months old. They didn't get that, in fact, these wonderful sponge brains were open and receptive and would gain from that. So that's a family message. So we don't know that talking matters and we don't know what to do. And I wanted to share this with you. This is what, if you think about the 30 million word gap and you think about kids who've got language starting school and learning to read, because this is to stop the pipeline of people heading toward adult literacy and learning without the skills for survival. This child is getting read to over a year, no books at all. They're getting some environmental print, about 8,000 words a year, some academic tract. I've forgotten to reference it. This child is getting around 80,000. This child is getting 1.8 million words from a book. This child may well have read to them before they start school 1,000 books. It may be 400 books, some of them read 3 times. It may be 200 books read 20 times each. Some kids will be getting 6,000 or 7,000 books read to them before school. But the trouble is, if you're not getting any books read to you, then you are becoming at a disadvantage. What do books give? Specifically, they give attachment, the relationship between whānau member and book and child on the lap. They give usually concepts and vocab that you don't know, that are more sophisticated and complex than you do in conversation. And they make children print and text aware, so there's real benefits. So, do our adult learning programs talk about this and model in every way possible why we collectively should be thinking about helping all our learners be more confident readers to their children. So if there are 3 prime factors in the intergenerational cycle, and I haven't put poverty in there because we can work collectively in our communities on poverty, but this is the education slice. What could we do? Talking about is join in the early oral language debate. Reading for pleasure. We are not going to make a difference if families don't get that reading for pleasure leads to fluency, which leads to more reading. And one of the ways we could engage with reading for pleasure is summer reading. Kids drop in summer reading. They stop reading over the summer and they can go back months. So imagine if the adult education community started to also campaign for summer reading programs, and we led them. And we thought about, with all the parents who come across our programs, okay, what are we going to do? How will we get you to be thinking about 6 books with your kids over the summer? How can we get you reading over the summer? What would be a challenge that we could set for learners, adult learners and their kids to read together? And one of the things I saw was summer reading in parks. Basically they had blankets, banners, like the ones outside, banners, ice blocks and books in the park. All those kids who never go away, never leave their street for the summer holidays. What could you do about a very low-cost, no-cost reading festival led by the adult community who who are thinking about how we engage in this. These are some of the messages that I have come to understand and that we're starting to promote. Babies are wired from birth. Most brain development happens here. What's happening in a young child's life is you're born with a jungle in your brain of brain cells, billions of brain cells. The more interaction you have with adults, positive interaction, the more paths are made in that brain. Children who are getting a lot of educational capital are getting super highway paths where they go straight, their brains are developing the pathways to language and learning. If you're not getting that and you're keeping the brain as a jungle or an overgrown path, you lack speed. If you don't get speed, you can't get fluency. If you don't have speed and fluency, you can't get to new knowledge quickly. Talking is great. What really makes a difference to children is conversational turns, back and forth, me and you trading off conversations together in your home language. So those are the kind of messages that I would love to see all adult education promoting with our families. And I've just put them in a more graphic way. Look at this. Do your families know that children can learn thousands of words before they start school? That chatting with children and playing with them switches on wiring. Do your parents know that play is children's work? Here are some ideas. Early reading together is a Ministry of Education 4-hour program run in low decile. Reading together runs in low decile schools. Early reading together is the early version of that. We could investigate what it would be like to get the early reading together resources promoted across all of the adult education sites in the country. So any whānau member, any nana, grandparent who isn't a confident reader could learn about becoming more confident. If adults would prefer to vomit than pick up a children's book, if adults are so frightened about reading a book to their kids and making a mistake that they avoid it, we can all do something about that together. We could start off, have a campaign on the Big Bedtime Read story. We could, all of you could be involved in growing language and literacy-rich communities. So here are my questions. So I've been going around giving this version of this talk to a lot of schools and early learning centres, and I was with 15 school teachers the other day, the whole of the staff of a primary school. They'd invited 2 other primary schools and 3 ECE centres, and they were talking about working with families, and they have these ideas about, you know, what they do, and I said, did you ever contemplate the fact that when a book comes home, the parent thinks, I'll make a mistake, and it better not to muck the kid up, I won't have anything to do with it. Have you ever thought that the idea of, you know, reading a book might be repulsive to an adult? And they just looked at me really blankly. I'm constantly amazed at the lack of awareness of the schooling sector about what it's like to work at the other end. And so I do think we have to keep consciously, and I don't want that to be a blaming thing in any way. You only know what you come across. But an early learning and library centre in Scotland have been doing some work that I'm looking at the moment, and the librarians went out to the front of the library and they just did one thing. They said to every parent coming into the library with a child, do you read a bedtime story to your child? And they were astonished to find that only 30% of the people attending the library were reading bedtime stories. They thought that, you know, you came to the library, you were a convert. So they simply moved a banner to the front door which said, reading to your children builds their brains. Talk to us about how we can help. And they started saying to parents, would you like to take out 2 books? And because reading to your children helps build their brains. And over some consistent, very simple initiatives, they've got the storied reading of the children attending the library up to 70% of them having a nighttime story. But they never thought they had to be that intentional because everybody did. An early learning centre the other day in South Auckland experimented by giving a 3-year-old a book from the ECE library. And the mother came back the next morning and said, why did you do that? My child can't read that book. Well, no, that wasn't the point. The mother had no idea that she was supposed to read the book because she didn't have any cultural connection to the idea of a parent reading a children's book. So that's the bit that we have some responsibility for, or some opportunity. I asked a few adult literacy schemes in Auckland, and I would say the same to some adult learning communities. If you, would an adult coming into your rooms, coming to a program, see any information on the wall that would leave them better equipped to know 5 things they could do for their child to break the cycle of learning being difficult? So talk more, talk with, interaction, read, we can help you with that, play, sing and tell stories, we'll find a book swap, but it's not there, so I think we could do something about that.